Hey folks, Matt Easton here, scholagladiatoria. So this is a HEMA thought, specifically HEMA thought, and something that bugs me more than anything else in HEMA, probably actually, in HEMA training at least, is doubles, okay? I just, like, doubles are such a frustrating thing, and I'm sure any of you out there who are training, not even necessarily HEMA, it could be any other martial arts, or could even be, you know, sport fencing or LARP or reenactment, could be all sorts of different things. Double hits, and this is something that, you know, if we look at computer games, for example, okay, random comparison, but as many of my regular viewers know, I play it's pretty much the only game I ever have time to play these days, is Mount and Blade Warband, and I usually play the Napoleonic Wars version. And something that really bugs me in that is, it is technically possible to get a double with shooting, but in hand-to-hand combat it's not really the case. If one person hits the other a fraction of a second before the other, then the person who hit a fraction of a second first gets a clean hit in, and the other person's hit doesn't even register. And this is one of my main gripes with, for example, épée fencing, is that the interval between the two épée points hitting is so tiny that if it was a real fight with real épées, you'd end up with two people skewered. But in the current electric scoring system, in actual fact, the person who strikes, I think it's like a 25th of a second or something like that, there's some discussion about what that interval is, but it's very, very small. The person who hits first scores the point, and the person who hits second doesn't. And in HEMA, that's not the case. If two people hit each other even remotely at the same time, it's classed as a double. Now, why does that annoy me so much? Well, actually, just the very fact that it exists, that it happens, annoys me. And I know that might sound irrational, because in reality, in historical combat, it definitely did happen. I've got numerous accounts over a wide variety of time. It's not something limited to a particular area of the world or a particular period. It's just something that, unfortunately, humans tend to hit each other at the same time sometimes, especially, it seems, if they're less competent. I'll come back to that point in a minute, because it's not always related to that. It can be related to many things. Now, in HEMA, when we're competing, when we're sparring, doubles, in my eyes, can kind of take several different forms, but fundamentally I think the two most common forms that they can take are what I would term a pure double. That is, where two people, just by bad luck or bad judgment or coincidence, attack each other or hit each other at the same time. And that just happens. And, you know, like rolling dice, there's odds that are involved, there are chances involved, and combat is so chaotic that inevitably sometimes that's just gonna happen. And it doesn't matter whether you're the best fencer in the world, or both people are shit, or both people are amazing, or even one is great and the other one is crap. That sometimes it would just happen that two people hit each other at the same time. And we obviously have to think of ways of dealing with that in the rules, in the system, whatever kind of system we're going to use for judging that fight. And I know some people will go, oh, you should only spar without rules. Well, there's always rules somehow. There's always, we have to have some kind of mechanism in our mind for deciding how we use sparring as a training implement, because ultimately I think that's what sparring is for most people, if not all people. I do understand some people see competitive fencing as the end goal, but I think for most people in HEMA, might be wrong in saying this actually, but I think if for most people I know in HEMA, actually they want to be the best swordsperson that they can be. And actually competition and sparring, whether it's in a tournament or whether it's informal sparring, is a tool for analysing their own progression in the art. There's lots of people out there like to call it, but in their progression, how, you know, have I got better? Well, I'm going to fight that person again and see, you know, if I can improve on how I did last time, or not make the same mistakes I made last time. It's a way of measuring our progress as a martial artist. But there are other kinds of doubles, and for me, one of the most, like, I do a David Rawlings impression here, but I can't do it as well as him. One of the things that annoys me the most in training is when you see you attack in the correct tempo, the correct distance, there's an opening there, everything is right, and you attack and the other person doesn't defend themselves and they just hit back. Okay, and so inevitably you usually hit them first because you've acted first. So in foil fencing, for example, or indeed sabre, you would have, modern sport fencing sabre, you would have right of way or priority because you had started to act first, and that is the purpose of right of way or priority rule in foil or modern sabre fencing. It's so that if I attack first, the other person can't just go ah and just do this and lead to a meaningless exchange where basically one person acted in good fencing tempo and good sense and the other person was just a fucking idiot. Because that could happen in a real fight, but in a sporting context it's just really fucking annoying, okay? Because one person was shit and one person was fine, they were doing okay. Now you could argue, if that can happen in reality, if in reality your opponent might just go ah and just like flinch and just wiggle their sword in your direction and might accidentally hit you, that might happen in reality, and that's true. And in a sense, therefore, you could say, and many of us do say, and I myself say, that it is your responsibility when you attack someone to do it in such a way that you've created an opening. Maybe you've opened with a feint, or maybe you've attacked so decisively they don't have time to respond. All of these things you could say, that your responsibility as an attacker is to make sure that they don't even have the window of opportunity through various methods of just going ah and wiggling their sword. Yes, that's true. In a perfect world, when I start to fence someone, I'll first of all try and suss that person out and try and see what their default reactions are. I'll give certain attacks, certain types of thing, you know, maybe see how they react to thrusts and cuts differently, how they deal with low line, you know, snipes at their leg, but I won't actually, maybe it'll be a feint at their leg and I'll see what they do, whether they slip their leg out of the way or whether they put their sword down to guard, all of these sort of things. How they move, if when I attack and they put their sword in the way, if they move backwards as they do it, do they retreat as they defend, do they stand their ground as they defend, do they look like they want to close in, is their body language telling me that they probably want to close and grapple with me? So the second that I'm in the ring or in you know, some kind of fighting environment with someone, I'm trying to work out what their preferred and default responses and actions are and modifying my own behaviour based on that. Okay, but nevertheless, sometimes when you fight someone, or when you spar with someone, fence with someone, whatever you want to call it, they, in the middle of the action, just do something which doesn't fit with their pattern of normal behaviour, and they flinch response and double. And this is one of the most annoying things and one of the most difficult things to avoid. And yes, in real life, it could happen. And that's really... well, I'm not going to give any great revelations here. That's just what I want to say, is that doubles are really freaking annoying, but they're not all in the same category. There are pure doubles that just happen because two people happen to move at the same time, okay? And then there are doubles where one person is more to blame than the other. There are some doubles where both people are to blame, and I have to say, so this is very typical when you look at sort of beginner level sparring. Very often, you know, people understandably are really keen to get in sparring. They're like, yeah, I want to hit the other person. They're thinking about hitting, but they're not thinking about defending, and that's really annoying. And that's, any teacher worth their salt should be looking for that sort of behaviour and reminding them that in a martial art with sharp weapons involved, or simulating sharp weapons, your priority should be in either ending the fight so quickly that the other person is a minimal risk to you, or defending yourself. But those kind of come under the same umbrella of not getting killed, okay? So definitely, unless you're some kind of cult freak kamikaze ninja something, you know, some weird kind of mindset, you're essentially an assassin or suicidal, or you just don't give a damn about your own life, you know. Unless you're some weird kind of category over there, if you're any other kind of normal person, soldier, civilian, defending themselves, whatever, a duelist, if you're any kind of normal category person, your priority is to not die, okay? And incapacitating and killing the other person might be preferable, and that might be what you're trying to do ultimately. That might be why you're there, you know, whether you're serving as a soldier or whether you're protecting your honour in a duel or whatever. That might be why you're there. But at the same time, if you die in the process, then what's the fucking point? Okay? So not only is your priority to make sure that you remain safe or as unwounded as possible, but also to wound the other person and then make sure that they don't wound you at some point in that process. So any teacher worth their salt in most HEMA systems that I'm aware of should be prioritising in the mindset of their students, I believe, not getting hit. And unfortunately, because of the safe sparring environment, relatively safe, you know, except for bruises and the occasional broken finger aside, for the relatively safe sparring environment in HEMA, one of the problems is we don't have any natural fear of death or of getting badly wounded or even of losing our honour necessarily, although that can be different. Your ego can kind of replicate that, I think, in a tournament setting. You don't want to look like an idiot. You want to look like you fenced well, even if you don't lose the bout, hopefully. But the environment, the context is very, very different to a real fight, and therefore people are thinking very often more about hitting the other person than they are about not getting hit. And that inevitably, I think, obviously I haven't been in many real sword fights or knife fights, or I've been unfortunately in a few real fights, but none of them where there were any fatalities. But you're generally speaking, in a competitive environment, you're thinking about scoring points ultimately. And that's why it's really important when we build rule sets for HEMA competitions. If we want it to even look remotely realistic, like a real sword fight, then the rules have to somehow falsely simulate some of the priorities that we want to see the fighters replicating in the fight. We don't want to only see, and sorry for those of you who do eskrima, but I've seen some eskrima competitions where literally the two people just run in and they're just like hit, 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 and they're just counting as many hits as possible. What does that simulate? I don't actually know. In a real world, I mean, I can understand why you might want to train people to do that in a training thing, to make them more aggressive and get them faster at attacking and stuff. But it's certainly not simulating a real fight with sharp weapons, because in the first 3 hits, both people would be dead. So anyway, it's all about kind of trying to train people to do the right behaviours and appreciate that a double hit, even though you've hit the other person, in sporting and I would say in martial training context, a double hit is as bad as you getting hit and not hitting the other person. It doesn't matter that you hit the other person because you're now potentially dead. So there we go, double hits. They frickin' annoy me, but my responsibility as a HEMAist and as a HEMA instructor is to try and reduce the number of doubles that I see in my own club and that I commit myself and receive myself. It's all of our responsibilities to try and reduce doubles, and it's not only about scoring hits, it's not only about winning bouts, it's about not getting hit, and that includes doubles. Cheers, folks. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on Facebook. You can buy t-shirts through Spreadshirt, support us on Patreon, or follow us on Pinterest. Thank you.